Okay, as we're going through today, one of the key things that we want to do that's different than just other equation solving is we're going to see a radical, or it might be written in exponential form as a fraction that we're going to need to undo. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to raise it to its reciprocal power. But to do that, the radical expression or parentheses has to be alone. So the different steps today that maybe you might have encountered before when solving is we're going to isolate the radical expression. Then to get rid of the radical expression, we are going to raise both sides of the equation to the reciprocal power. I'll explain what that means in a second. Then you're going to just solve how you know how to solve. All of you know how to solve an equation at this point in Algebra 2. Okay. Let me talk about what I mean by a reciprocal power. Yesterday we talked about how do you think you undo a square root? What would you do to both sides? You'd raise it to the power of 2, right? Because really a square root is the 1/2 power. And what's the reciprocal of 1/2? 2, or 2 over 1. So to undo a square root, you're going to square both sides. What do you think you're going to do to undo a cubed root, though? If you were thinking, this is the 1/3 power. What power do you think you'd raise it to? You can just show me some fingers if you think you know. Yep, you'd raise it to that's called cubing it. Same with a 4th root. You'd raise it to the 4th power. A 5th root, you'd raise it to the 5th power. Tomorrow we'll even do some that are like 2/3 or things like that. And you're going to need probably your calculator in some cases because they're not going to always be exact. Okay. All right. Let's do 3 examples. All right. So the very first one we'll do is a square root. So if I asked you to solve the square root of 2x minus 8 equals 4. All right, so step 1, isolate the square root expression. That is already isolated. Isolate means get it alone on one side. So what I mean by that is, like, let's say there was a number out in front of it or a number behind it. I would need to move that to the other side. Once this is isolated, we're going to now raise both sides to the reciprocal power. So what's the reciprocal power of the square root? It would be 2. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to square that side. And we're going to square that side. Squaring a square root undoes the square root. So we're left with 2x minus 8. What about 4 squared? 16. Okay, and so what I mean now by solve as normal, you'd add 8 to both sides. Um, 16 plus 8 is 24, right? Divide both sides by 2. X equals 12. let's just do a quick check to make sure it works. Up here, 2 times 12 is 24. 24 minus 8 is 16. And isn't the square root of 16 give me 4? Okay, that's an easy way to check your answer. Okay. Trying to see which ones I assigned today. Second example. What if I had the fifth roots, which you might see it written as the 1/5 power, or you might see the radical. Okay. This is something you might need a calculator for. So I'll give you a second to grab one. Okay, the radical expression, in this case I wrote it as an exponent, is that. Is it alone on this side? No. So when I say isolate, I mean get it alone on this side. What am I going to need to do to get this expression alone? Subtract the 5. So I'm going to do that first. I have 3x plus 8 to the 1/5 power, and now that's alone, equals 2. Step 2, raise it to the reciprocal power, both sides. The reciprocal of 1/5 is squared. Squared? Crazy. 5. Guys, were you thinking I was wrong? Were you just going along with it? Was anybody going to say anything? 1/5, 5. If I do it to this side, I got it to do it to that side. Some of you know what 2 to the 5th was, but once you start getting with things that are higher than squaring, you might not. So what is 2 to the 5th? Would somebody tell me that? Thank you, Abby. 32. And then this raising 1/5 to the 5th undoes that, because 5 to the 1/5 is 1, so we have just 3x plus 8. All right, let's finish it. I subtract 8 from both sides. 3x equals 24. Divide by 3, x equals 8. All right, so I'm going to get my calculator out a minute, and I'm going to check the answer in the original, make sure it works. So 3 times, oops, I'm going to put it in parentheses, 3 times 8 plus 8, and raised to the 1/5. Oops, I have to add the 5. Actually, right there, that works, right? Because it equals 2, which is what I got in step 2. That's what I got right there. All right, let's do one more. What if we see radicals on both sides? So let's do that. Let's solve the square root of x minus 5 equals 2 times the square root of x minus 3. Any ideas on this one? Because this one I don't have one radical expression. So I have 2 radical expressions. So they're both kind of isolated, right? I mean, there is that 2 there. We'll talk about that in a second. It is multiplication. So I think what I'm going to try when I see something like this is I'm going to just go right to my second step, which is we're going to raise both sides to the reciprocal power. So what's going to be the reciprocal power of the square root? It's going to be squared. Now, would you be careful, please, and make sure you put this whole side to the second power, okay? On this side, square root is gone. Hello. Okay. 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 Let me finish up my notes a second and then I can find something. Okay. To him or you? Okay. Sounds good. Bye. Okay. Be careful here because this is not underneath the square root sign. Do you see that? So when I square this whole side, this becomes a 4. The square root undoes, or the squaring undoes that piece. Okay. This kind of solving, I distribute. Since I have x's on different sides of the equation, I am going to move this over to here. So I'm going to subtract x from both sides. So I have negative 5 equals 3x minus 12. I add 12 to both sides. Let's see, negative 5 plus 12 is 7 equals 3x. I divide by 3. This is not a nice decimal. It's like 2 and a third. 2.3 repeating if you want to leave it as a decimal, or you can just go ahead and leave it as 7/3.